quite a busy day. Morena tātou, ngā mihi mahana ki a koutou kua hui hui mai I tēnei rā. Good morning and welcome to everybody who's here and all our colleagues that are on the Zoom land as well. We have some most people are zooming in, so there's no apologies for no attendance. Mark Donovan for lateness. So, with those apologies, oh no, Mark Donovan is now here, so he's not late.
Your Worship, while on the Zoom, I have to leave about 10:40 at the latest for a medical appointment.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you for that. So early departure for Mark if it should occur. No lateness for Mark Donovan. Everyone else is on Zoom. I think I haven't received any other apologies. So we'll move into the meeting proper, which has the one item, which is item 5. Oh, I'll move and second the apologies. Which is really only that Bunty might leave early now. Thank you. I've moved. Councillor Wilson has seconded. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Confirmation of the agenda. It is as it is. Also move. Seconded, Councillor Wilson. What? Councillor Wilson.
Sorry.
Question, Councillor O'Leary.
Question, I just want to make sure I've got the right information. In the PX item on page 3, it says that the late report with further information will be circulated under a separate cover. I've got the CEO's email from Wednesday, but are we supposed to get a separate item?
So there was, so there was a agenda uploaded to Diligent yesterday afternoon. There would have been an email from Amy that came out about that.
Which is an open.
Which is no.
So I've only got, if it's attached to the PX, I've got 3 pages, and I've
No, it's in the open.
updated, and there's nothing there. And I don't think the others have got it either.
It's in the open session.
So there's no late PX report?
No, there's only a late open report.
I think that's what Angela
Can you just tell, sorry Vicky, can you tell me what page? Because I've got 26 and pages in the open, and I cannot for the life of me see a draft policy in there.
So I don't think a draft policy is attached. Is that correct?
No, can I just clarify? So originally we were looking at whether the item was in public excluded or in open. That's why there might be a bit of confusion around the public excluded bit. There may be some discussion that comes up in this session where we might want to move into public excluded if it's relating to staff matters, and we might cross over privacy or liability issues. I suspect the likelihood of that is quite low. So the report in the end, we made the decision that it was in open, which is the report, which is the 26 pages in the open session. There's no policy. The policy that's gone out to staff is a vaccination policy, which is the responsibility of the CEO. The matters that we're discussing today it's alluded to in the report, but the main matter is around the introduction of my vaccine certification for entry to council facilities, which is a matter for the council to make decisions on. So sorry if there's confusion around that. I did circulate our consultation document just through a CE email the other day, just to inform elected members what we're doing internally, even though that's a staff matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved, it's been seconded, all in favour? Opposed? Carried. So that moves us on to item 5. Council for...
Declarations of interest.
Oh, sorry, forget. Any direct declarations of interest on this matter?
Particularly interested.
Ewan Wilson is particularly interested, but has no declaration as such. Thanks. There being none, we move on to item 5, which is the vaccination certificate policy for COVID-19. And we're going to take the report as largely as read, but you're going to highlight a few pertinent issues for us. You are? Yeah. Brilliant. Lance is going to highlight some issues.
Thanks, Mayor Paula. As as you said, I'd take the report as read, but there's just a few things I just wanted to cover that. As I said before, just in a clarification around the agendas, that this report addresses matters that council needs to make decisions on rather than the CE or staff. And obviously it's related to the government shift away from the COVID-19 elimination strategy under the current alert level system to what is now a suppression strategy under the COVID-19 protection frameworks, which we all know are the traffic light system, and which takes effect nationally on Friday. And we obviously all keenly were looking at the announcements yesterday around what colours the traffic lights would be in each region. And obviously, for at least the next 2 weeks, the Waikato is in orange. The report outlines the work that we have done around our meeting our obligations as a good employer and to take all reasonable practical steps under the Health and Safety at Work Act to ensure our staff are safe and that we eliminate or minimise risks if they can't be eliminated. So as I said, we've alluded to that in the report. We've gone out to staff with a draft COVID-19 vaccination policy. That consultation ends tomorrow, and then myself and the senior leadership team will be considering all that information and then making a decision on Friday on the final form of that internal staff policy around vaccinations. Based on the risk assessments of all our roles across council, using the WorkSafe guidelines, we propose that all staff who attend council sites need to be fully vaccinated. And obviously we'll carefully consider the feedback we get from staff, and there will be views, a range of views across staff, so we'll carefully consider those. I've taken a low risk tolerance approach to the policy, and the rationale for that is in section 35 of the report. In regards to consideration of and decisions of any entry to council facilities, for example, the requirement for patrons over 12 to have a My Vaccine certificate to enter, then it's for you as elected members to make these decisions. I'll just make you aware, some other councils have taken a bit of a different approach. Some councils are letting the CE make those decisions. I carefully looked at this and spoke to our guests from Tompkins Wake here today, with Mark Hammond and Fiona Dalziel and other council. My view is that it's a matter of public interest, so I think that the council should make those decisions around entry to council facilities. So this also includes, the paper today includes consideration decision making in regards to entry requirements for all participants at council meetings, such as council meetings, committee meetings, hearings, council workshops, briefings and advisory group meetings as well. So in the report, staff have recommended that council requires all persons over 12 years old who don't have a formal exemption to produce a valid My Vaccine pass for entry to the majority of council facilities, and they're listed in a couple of places in the report. In my view, this will give further effect to council's health and safety obligations to staff to eliminate and or minimise risks, but also it will give reassurance to the public that our facilities are managed in a way that's consistent with the government's new frameworks, its direction around COVID-19, and which minimises the transmission of COVID-19 as well in places where people potentially gather. So the report, there's a couple of different sets of recommendations there. And the report recommends that H3 sites and Hamilton Pool sites move to the My Vaccine pass for entry this Friday on the 3rd of December. The reason being is that H3 have carried out all consultation with staff, and obviously there was a lot more clarity around events earlier in the piece from government in their direction. We only got direction around other public facilities formally announced last Friday, so we'd had some inkling from different government departments, but now that have been posted on the COVID-19 website. The reason why Hamilton Pools is there, you might ask the question there, moving to orange, if we would have that 11-day period, which we're recommending the other facilities go into the My Vaccine pass requirement on the 14th of December, which is the day before the border opens to Auckland, and arguably the risk profile could increase with that spread of people from Auckland. If we'd actually gone to keeping Hamilton pools at the 14th of December, we'd probably end up in the strange situation where the gymnasium would have to be closed. And so it'd be open up until Friday, then it'd have to be closed for 11 days, and then it would reopen again when we click into that system on the 14th of December. So we thought that would probably look like a bit of a nonsense to the public, and we want to get continuity going forward. And Liz Can, the manager, and Helen Parkey, the general manager, assured me that we have enough staff who are fully vaccinated to actually run those facilities from the 14th of December. So the report also recommends all our other listed facilities move to the My Vaccine Pass entry on the 14th of December. This will give us some time to operationalise everything. Obviously, there's some technology involved. There's assistance we need to organise for at the entry, signage, there's communications, and also we are working with some industry organisations to just get further clarity, such as around working with the Funeral Directors Association of New Zealand around funerals, and obviously that's a sensitive time for people, and we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. The other thing, it'll give us a little bit of time to trial things at Waterworld and at H3 sites, and H3 actually have a cricket match at Seddon Park on Friday night, and they've been working very closely with Northern Districts Cricket on implementing the new system, and all their members have been involved and contacted and that sort of thing. So we'll have a good 10 or 11 days. We'll actually probably get some learnings from those two sites, should you make the decision for all the other facilities to go to vaccine pass entry. The other thing is, in our staff policy, should it go through in a similar vein to what the proposal is, then that will give the small number of staff who are not yet fully vaccinated to have their first or second jab. And we've said in that policy that we would like people to have at least their first jab by the 13th of December and their second one by the 17th of January, notwithstanding the fact that a recent Pulse survey showed that we have around 90% of our staff fully vaccinated already from the 2/3 of the staff we surveyed. And the 14th of December, as I said before, is also the day before the borders open to Auckland, which could arguably increase those risk factors. So that means a number of our sites and what we're proposing in the recommendations would work under the orange traffic light system for an 11-day period without the My Vaccine certificate requirement for entry, which is similar to level 2 that we're operating at the moment. It should also be noted that the transportation centres aren't included in the sites. They're deemed to be essential services, and Mish and David and Fiona and Mark can give further detail on that if there's questions around that. We've also included spreadsheets at the back of the end of the report, which has got detailed information on all our facilities, including something which I know you'd be interested in is the alternative ways of accessing our services for those people who choose not to be vaccinated, and also how we would operate if we don't implement the vax entry requirement, which in a nutshell provides some more restrictions by not having the vax entry requirement. Just an overview, I've been looking at what other councils are doing. We're generally in line with most other large councils in New Zealand. They're following a similar approach. And just to finish off with, I just wanted to mention I do have the support people here, Mish, David, and also Mark and Fiona. And we also, I think we should have Sean Murray online, who's been doing a lot of work operationally right across our organisation. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have got questions. I note that Ewan and Dave are the mover and the seconder, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question from Mark, then one from Dave, and then I have a small question myself. Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. So with regards to the logistics of it, for example, the gardens, are you anticipating having someone, as they go into the enclosed gardens, with a little scanner, swiper thing, or how's that going to work?
Correct. So what we'll be doing is at the entry to all our facilities, we'll have a person there, and there's I think David's even downloaded on his phone. There's an app which and then we'll have people with devices there. So basically, people will come through with their either their paper or their electronic copy of their My Vaccine pass, and then that will be
Scanned.
pretty much scanned by the person at the entry.
Okay.
And we will have to hire in some additional support. We've done that at Alert Level 2 at a number of areas and iterations of Alert Level 3 previously, just to give staff a hand. We would review that month by month to see how it's going, and then if it's getting quite smooth, then we'll probably transition to staff doing that within the complement of staff that we've got.
Right.
Just that my experience is normally when you change things, there could be the most interest will be in that first couple of months period until things are normalised throughout the community.
Yeah, okay. So are you ready for tension and the likes? Because there may be. Are we putting our staff at reasonable risk?
We will have hired-in staff who are trained to de-escalate and to work with, the patrons or potential patrons who come along who may not be vaccinated. I'd have to say also the Ministry of Health and MB have actually put up some really good guidance around that on their websites to help out hospitality people, retail and other sectors with that.
So you mentioned earlier on about funerals in the crematorium. So a couple of questions around that. I assume that would be the same thing, would be hiring people in to do that to start with?
We're just working that through with the funeral directors. So Michelle and the team work very closely with the funeral directors, have a great relationship. If we need to, yes, but we still have to work that through with the funeral directors, and obviously the question of cost comes in there, but we'll work that through in a way where we get mutual agreement. We like to work in partnership with the funeral directors. Yeah. And it has been challenging for them over the last 20 months.
Oh, yeah.
We'll continue that, and we don't have all the answers yet, but I think we need you notice that we've only put in there the actual built facilities at Hamilton Park Cemetery, so it doesn't stop unvaccinated people going to visit a loved one's grave or anything like that.
Right, but if there's a graveside service with vaccinated and unvaccinated people, do the same rules apply, or...?
I think we should be okay outside. It'll depend on the numbers there are too, and there'll be physical distancing and things like that.
Okay.
It's mainly the gatherings indoors, which if we require the My Vaccine passport, we'll have to think about probably like putting a marquee outside the chapel so that we have a range of options, so we don't exclude those people who choose not to be vaccinated.
So are you anticipating that's something we would supply as a part of our venue?
Sorry, what was that?
Are you anticipating that would be something that we would supply as part of our venue?
Look, we'll work that through.
Okay.
We've done it before, so we'll just have to look at that and just work that through around the cost of that. But we do have access to marquees at quite a good rate. So
totally, and because I was interested when you said cost, because each one of these comes at a cost, and I would hate to see the funeral directors, because they are funeral directors, being the only ones that actually are being asked to pay. So I'm looking forward to seeing you working with them on that.
Still got to work that through.
Yeah.
Obviously, no one ever wants to pay, but someone does have to. So we'll have to just work that through and see what works for everyone.
Yeah.
And obviously, when someone passes, it's an expensive time for families, but also we need to think of the ratepayer as well.
Like you do with all the others, yeah. Okay. Can I just ensure that there's going to be a staff action that records that that's going to be there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we're expecting, and just talking to Maria and Michelle and the team, is that the Funeral Directors Association of New Zealand is still working very closely with the government, with DIA and MB, just hopefully we'll get some more guidance coming out from them, so there's some consistency throughout New Zealand how these things are handled.
Yeah, and I guess because my concern, if I can phrase it in some sort of question, Mayor Paula, is that all of these other things are kind of choices to go to or not, and funerals are a little bit more, they're a slightly different situation, so I'm looking forward to seeing how we handle it.
And that's your prerogative. If you don't want to include that in the list of facilities that we require a My Vaccine pass, then that's up to this meeting.
No, personally, I think, and it's becoming a discussion, but I do want to include it, but I just want to see how we manage the control of it. Great. Thanks, Mayor Paula.
Yeah, so I'm assuming, Lance, you'll bring some further information back on that, including the costs and the discussion?
Yeah, correct. And I think I'd hope to I'd hope that we get some more direction in the next 7 to 10 days.
Yeah.
And the funeral stuff did go through iterations last year. You know, every couple of weeks we were getting finesses to the requirements of funeral directors and funeral homes and cemeteries and crematoriums.
One more question on that. So if someone has an exemption, you know, because of medical reasons, are they considered to be vaccinated and therefore able to go into a tangihanga or a funeral without it affecting the numbers? Is that right?
My understanding is yes,
Is that right?
as long as they get an exemption through the formal process
yeah.
through the health system.
So that's not going to drop the number requirement down for a funeral. Good to know. Okay. Thank you. Thanks,
My
Lance. Appreciate
understanding
it.
is the threshold's so super high to get an exemption.
Yeah.
However, okay, I have some questions online. Dave, then Sarah, Angela and Maxine.
Thanks, Mayor Paula.
Not necessarily in that order.
It's quite hard to hear some people in the chamber that aren't speaking directly into the microphone. Lance and Mark were fine, but the rest of you have been a bit quiet for us to hear. Look, I had two questions. One relating to, and it sort of flows on a little bit from the cemetery discussion that Mark initiated, Mark 1 that is, the hireable facilities. I just want to clarify, and I've personally had a discussion with your staff members about some ideas there. I'm not sure whether they're baked in yet, Lance. When it's a hireable facility and it's hired to a non-professional organisation, i.e. not Northern Districts Cricket or Chiefs Rugby, how does the checking of the vaccine passes, how's that proposed to happen? And how do we ensure that it happens, I guess, as a council?
I think, Councillor Dave, you're probably talking like Te Rapa Sportsdrome and Endley community centres, and probably more the Sportsdrome.
Yeah, it might be also the pavilion at Hamilton Gardens, for instance.
Yeah, well, we'll have staff or hired people to actually assist with that. And we understand a number of these community organisations are, you know, it's hard to get volunteers, and it potentially could get harder with COVID. So initially we would start that, and then if we have groups which are confident enough to be able to do that themselves or well resourced, then we'd work with them and come to some arrangement. So look, we'll be as helpful as possible.
So the policing will initially be the responsible council, if I'm hearing you right, but that you'll try and devolve that where possible on a sort of one-off basis. Is that what?
Yeah, correct. I think the Te Rapa Sportsdrome's, you know, a bit of it's an interesting situation because we don't actually have a staff member there all the time, but obviously as we, you know, work through with what we do with that facility and also, you know, the potential community facility there as well, then that could change over time, or if we look at contracting it out to the Peak or someone. So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, thanks. Now, the other one is you comment about the transport centre, which I'm not sure that I agree with you on excluding the transport centre building. You've just talked about the transport centre, which is a precinct, if you like. It's got all the bus stopping areas, but it's also got a building, and within that building, council staff, Waikato regional council staff, contractor staff at the cafe, plus cleaners of course that come in from time to time, and security guards also do the same. I'm wondering why that can't be included in the policy, the building itself, because if you want to get a bus ticket, for instance, you can get them either online or from the bus. You can top up your B passes and things like that. So I'm thinking of in terms of the health and safety of the various organisation staff members that work inside the building as opposed to the surrounds.
Yeah, I just might get Mish to comment on that around the essential service requirements.
Thanks, Lance. The current advice that we have is that anything that's associated with public transport should not be vaccine certificate mandated. I think this is probably an example of where we need to work through this a bit more. But our current understanding is that anything to do with public transport, and that's also to do with accessing bathrooms and eating facilities and those sorts of things, they can't actually, that it's essentially considered an essential service.
Look, I challenge that because look at the cafe, the public can and do go in there as well as obviously public transport patrons. It's not just for the exclusive use of public transport people. And surely that cafe and the staff there should have the same protections as any other cafe. That's one. And two, we have actually got public toilets that are available from the outside, don't have to be accessed from the inside. We set them up so that after hours, intercity buses and whatnot, passengers could use them anyway. So it just seems like we have, I'm not sure that when council staff thought up a policy for this, that they had a good look at the transport centre building and what were the alternatives. I mean, I appreciate you had a whole lot to look at, so I'm not trying to cast blame, but I'm saying I think you need a bit more in-depth look at that particular one, because there's several staff in there that would get exposed to a lot of people moving through, and that may, and given that the rest of public transport is open to unvaccinated, then I wouldn't want to be a staff member working there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Councillor McPherson. I guess the difficulty that we have at the moment has been the timeframes, and this is the initial advice that we've had via the Ministry of Transport. The staff have built in a delegation for the CE to review the settings as we, I guess, embed the traffic light system in our processes. So possibly the best way to look at that would be a staff action to look at that in more detail as how that guidance relates to our specific facilities. Lance, I don't know if you've got any comment on that.
I agree with that, Mish, and maybe also in conjunction with the regional council and the contractors involved there.
Yes, so Councillor Dave, we'll, if elected members are happy with E, then that's something where, in the recommendations, is that we can go away and do some further work on that, get some further clarification, bring you up to date on that, and then we can make a decision from there. And look, I really appreciate you, having a view towards the safety and wellbeing of the staff. But my understanding is that the government have been quite clear around essential services and transport. But look, we'll go away and just check that, and then we can come back to council on that.
Yeah, I just would say, Lance, that essential services is there to ensure that everyone can get transport, not that everyone can access a building for a coffee before transport. It's it, if you get my meaning.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So we'll just go. We'll just go away and get that clarity, and then if we do implement Vax Pass there, then that's not that hard to implement reasonably quickly when we move to our dates.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, sorry if it's not in the right order. I've got Sarah, Andrea, and then Maxine.
Thanks, Mayor Paula. Lance, I have a question around the enclosed gardens. So that was, I guess, just the one that stood out to me a bit in terms of potentially being a lower risk because it's outside compared to other indoor facilities. And I was just interested in where that ended up measuring up in terms of risk compared to other facilities.
You're right, there's a significant part of it is outside, but there's some very narrow pathways there, and also some almost tunnel-like parts to it. So that's, and we have through previous alert levels as had limits on numbers under various alert levels settings. We've had staff at the entry and that sort of thing to make sure that we don't have the bottlenecks where there could be risk of people, getting within 1 metre or so of each other. So that's why we're doing that. And the other thing, remembering that in about 13 months' time, you'll have a new visitor centre which everyone will have to walk through and walk out through to get into the enclosed gardens as part of the charging entry from 1st of January 2023.
Thank you.
Okay, but in terms of the risk, it might put members of the public at risk from each other, but would you say that the risk to staff is quite low? For the enclosed gardens aspect of that, I guess, until we have a visitor centre?
Well, it'll be lower than what if we have a visitor centre, because at the moment, obviously, people don't have to walk through the visitor centre to get into the enclosed gardens. So the answer is yes, but there's also risks of transmission between members of the public and our staff walking around, because there's quite often staff in those areas. There's probably about 5 or 6 staff who are almost permanently working in the enclosed gardens.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was around the funerals, and do you know whether other facilities, say privately owned ones, are going to be requiring vaccination certificates so that there is families?
I don't, but if Maria's on the line, she might be able to answer that question. Sorry, I don't have the Zoom stuff in front of me. Is Maria on there?
Yes, I am on the line. My internet connection is not fabulous, so if I cut out. But Councillor Sarah, the families will have multiple choices, including holding services at home if they want to run an unvaccinated event. As Lance said earlier, we're working very, very closely with our funeral directors to make sure that the outcomes for family and whānau are good. So,
okay. And thank you, Maria. The other part of that question was just around in that spreadsheet, when looking at alternatives, it said that we don't have any Wi-Fi facilities, so couldn't do a live stream. What would it cost to have that available? And is that something that, if it became clear, was something people wanted? So we don't want to, I guess we don't want to put all the money in and then no one uses it, but if it was something people wanted in order to enable something to go ahead, then what would it cost?
So we're already working on that, Councillor Sarah, even pre-COVID, with the border restrictions and travel overseas. Live streaming is definitely something that is of interest to families. Working very closely with the IES team, and we've done the expensive bit, is my understanding, so the cabling is in place. It's just some issues with final connection we need to resolve.
Okay, and then once that has been resolved, you would be able to have indoor and outdoor event where those who can't go inside could be watching live stream from.
Yes, and ultimately all of those discussions will be had with the families, so their wishes will be at the forefront of how our service is run.
Okay, thank you.
Wi-Fi there. I've certainly hosted funerals that have been live streamed from that event, so I'm surprised at that answer.
I can't answer that. All right, moving on. So I have Rob in the room with a question too. Angela, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Paula. Just a question for Sean Murray, our new Deputy CEO. Sean, this morning some of us received an email query about the farmers market at Claudelands. So I know that the Claudelands obviously, I think, is mandatory, isn't it, that it has to be vaccinated. So can you just explain, this person is challenging us that the farmers market is food, therefore essential?
Yes, you're exactly right. We have had a long
while meeting with the organisers of the farmers market and a bit of communication, it's been a challenging topic for them. Essentially, yes, it's a food provision and a retail provision, but the farm is also a community gathering. The farmers market is also a community gathering. It has spaces for picnics, playgrounds for kids, eating, it has food stands, coffee stands, and everything else. And the alternative that we said, if we operated it, or they operated it without the vaccination certificate control, would be a bit like going into limited entry that you have into a supermarket, where their numbers are controlled, distancing required at each store, moving on, and then no community vibe, if you like. So it really wasn't going to enable the farmers market to be what it should be, to be honest. So that's probably the reason.
So are you saying then that even though we're designating Claudlands to be with vaccine passes, that events can then still choose?
No, we're not. We are pretty...
Oh, okay. They can't choose, yeah.
But what I'm saying is that we had a very conversation with them to see how it could work and whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the questions I had for H3 that we need to be mindful of is consistency of our thinking and consistency of our policy and actions. Because as soon as we do exceptions, then it gets a little bit messy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you. I'm going to take Rob and then come to you, Maxine.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula. A couple of questions. Have we considered whether we have any legal requirements or obligations to extend this policy, assuming it gets approved this morning, to the likes of some of our partnerships and CCOs and so forth? Now, I'm thinking here of the peak. We've got partner pools where we have presumably funding that goes to those pools. We've got places like the Gardens Cafe, the Lake Cafe, and we've got our CCOs, which we legally own, but use a different structure for those entities to be owned, in the same way that if we'd put the pool Waterworld into a limited liability company, we might be ignoring it if we're ignoring them in this particular instance.
We'd have to do that through our contractual arrangements, our MOUs, or our statement of intent. Pretty much most of those organisations that you're talking about, I would expect that they would move to the My Vaccine entry. The peak is problematic because it's covered by the education mandate, and then it's got community entrance at the other end, and so Sport New Zealand's weaving their way through some of those joint facility matters which cross over. So the intent, though, from the peak is that it's vaccine entry. The others that you mentioned, like the we'll be talking to the operators of cafes, concessionaires, and about it's in their own interest to have My Vaccine passport, because if they end up in red, then they're going to be pretty limited on the numbers they can get into their facilities and how much money they're going to make. So
I appreciate that. It's just a matter of whether we are obliged to get some degree of certainty that they have put in place at least a policy which is as good, if not better, than our policy, given that we may have some reputational damage or some backlash, given that we either own the facility or we're helping to fund it, or we own it through a different structure.
Yeah, we'd have to have those discussions, and I'm not a contract lawyer, but I expect you'd have to do that through mutual agreement or negotiation. If they were not inclined to be in line with what we're doing. My understanding, though, talking to Helen Parkey and her team, is that I think we're all pretty much in line. We work in partnership with those operators, and if we have to, we can look through those agreements and have those discussions if it becomes problematic, and we'll bring that to your attention. I think the speed this has happened, Councillor Rob,
I understand that.
It's a really good point. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Putting the
consistency
antenna out there to make sure that we've we haven't forgotten about it
Okay.
if it does come to
No,
pass.
Chris
We
Allen's
have a
all over
limit.
the contract stuff, so he's working 25 hours a day now.
So sorry, we have a limit to this time for this meeting. So I'm just going to
Can I just have one
question.
Yeah, one
absolutely.
quick question, and that is around the financial considerations. And I know this is time-driven, but we haven't included any estimate of what the costs of we've talked about some of the additional costs we're going to face, but we haven't put a provision in to give us an indication of what that cost is going to be, nor have we considered, perhaps in 79 to 81, whether or not there's an opportunity for us to recover some of those costs back in terms of entry fees or however it might be possible to do that. Is there a timeline, I guess, is there a timeline that we will get some feedback on that?
Yeah, Sean, did you want to mention costs of some of the ballpark figures you've been working on, or is it too premature yet?
Look, it's sort of early days, but we expect the total cost across council to be around $40,000 per week in terms of additional contracted staff that would be required from various locations. However, we also expect that figure will start to fall back as we get into the groove and as our management plans get tighter and a little bit more efficient. In the case of H3, we will be passing on the incremental cost to our customers because it is a compliance requirement for them to have. So new cost, it will be passed on to them in the H3 instance. Having said that, for a short transitional period for the farmers market, for example, we are sort of doing a stage over a month. We're doing a bit of a staged assistance to help them initially.
I've got other, but I know you're short of time, so look,
I'll talk to you offline,
if I can get
Councillor
some
Rob.
confidence that in fact we are looking at what opportunities there might be there in order to recoup those, because I think users will have a mindset that they expect, as we are in restaurants and so forth, expecting to pay more for things that we want in these times.
Yeah, and as I said, we'll review things monthly and we'll bring it back through the Finance Committee.
Thank you.
So we'll get some more time for any wash-up questions in a minute, but I do want to save time for debate also, which is where those points are usefully raised. I'm going to go to Councillor Max.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. I'm just querying the two separate dates, Lance, that appear in the report. I understand that we'll be entering the traffic light protection framework on the 2nd of December at 11:59 p.m. So I guess I wonder if there's the opportunity to mirror that in our report. But also you note the 14th of December, and I wonder why that is rather than being the 3rd or the 2nd.
To be honest, it's about making sure that we have enough time to operationalise and work through all the nuances at all those facilities. And the other thing is to, as I said before, to give the opportunity, if our staff policy goes through on Friday, close to what it is now, then that we are saying in that staff policy that people have to have their first and potentially second jabs by the 13th of December. So it's to make sure that we don't trip ourselves up around employment relations obligations. And I think I've explained the pools and the H3 sites, getting ahead of that. So, and the key thing for us was to move to the new regime before the borders open to Auckland, where arguably the risk could be higher with COVID seeping out of Auckland.
Okay, and you don't regard the additional time in between as being additional risk either for our staff from the 3rd, to the 14th or 15th?
Well, they're going to be operating exactly pretty much how they are now, and the signs around the numbers in the Waikato are dribbling around the 5 to 10 mark on average each day. So, you know, I'm not an epidemiologist and I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd expect that for the 11 days, I think, Councillor Max, the risk is probably no more than what it is now to staff. For me, the key thing is once that border with Auckland opens up, you know, you can jump to the conclusion that there might be more risk to staff because there could be more COVID in the community.
Thank you. Yes, I would agree, I guess. And then my other question is, how might we be able to mitigate those who are not vaccinated having access to services that that they view as being essential and without cutting them out from the opportunity to engage with us?
Look, to be really honest, some of the facilities will be difficult. It's hard to replicate a 50-metre swimming pool outside of Waterworld, and that experience. We do have virtual tours at the zoo, we do have virtual tours at the museum. Things like libraries, who I think you may be alluding to, is that we have had click and collect. Stephen and the team are very mindful of the different parts of our community, and we try and be flexible as we can around people being able to access, you know, borrowed materials as much as they can through a, you know, that contactless way, and that's been really successful right through the last 20 months. So that's one example, and there's some more in the spreadsheets there. Our teams are quite innovative, and I'd like to see that innovation continuing about how we could help people.
And might we also be in a position to give some of our older residents some assistance and help with vaccination certificates or advice on that?
Absolutely. So our outreach staff would be doing that, and my understanding is I think you can do that at pharmacies as well. I think the government's rolling that out in association with the pharmacies.
Kia ora and thanks, Kesh.
Councillor Rob's heading to the library after this.
Thank you. Councillor Cash.
Thank you. Lance, you talked about, there's a few questions. With the zoo, Waterworld, the museum, you know, we obviously have schools who plan visits to those facilities. Who would be responsible for making sure, are we making sure that those kids have vaccine passes, or does that fall under the education mandate, or how would that work?
That's all pretty clear under the education mandate. Our staff that interact with them have to obviously be double vaccinated. That's already happened, and then obviously the schools have to manage that as well through their various frameworks. So I think we're in good shape for that, and we'll comply with all the education mandate and also the other requirements from the Public Health Service around that.
Okay, and coming back to events at the gardens, for example, you know, whether it be the pavilion or the enclosed garden, you talked about council employing people to check for passes and things. Is that would that be just for the charitable organizations, or what about private hireage? You know, where does the responsibility sit?
I'm probably not the right person to answer that. It's probably more of a legal question, but my view is, you know, you're right. We have a range of organisations that use the gardens. If there's commercial event organisers, they will generally have all the personnel involved, and our teams don't have to do a lot apart from setting up, you know, the chairs and what have you. So there'll be a mixture, and we'll work that through. And as Councillor Rob said, then we'll look at passing on the cost to the commercial operators.
And things like, you know, private hireage, like for parties and weddings and things, would that be council's responsibility or the hirer?
They'll have to comply. Sorry, Sean?
Sorry, if I could step in here, it actually is a joint responsibility. We have a duty of care as the venue owner and operator, but also the person who is calling the event has a duty of care as well. And that's no different to what we do now with overall health and safety planning for any events that come our way. So it's a dual responsibility. We will require our clients to do certain things, or we will do it on their behalf and charge them quite simply for those sorts of events, whether it's a function or...
Yeah, and so, I mean, because this is all happening quite fast, would that be staged, or does that actually happen on the 14th of December?
That will happen pretty quickly, pretty much straight away, but it will be a case-by-case conversation with whichever booking operator is being dealt with.
Okay, and coming back to, will this cover community houses as well?
I might get Mish to answer that around the leasing and those arrangements.
So a couple of examples that we've looked at in terms of trying to pull the work together is Enderley Community House and the Te Rapa Sports Dome, just as examples of how there is some mixed use with some of our facilities. So the way that we've approached it is to say, look, on a principled basis, if someone has a lease, and I'm talking about a lease in a legal sense, which is a fixed long-term agreement for exclusive use, that in general we would be saying to them, look, whether or not you mandate vaccination certificates is up to you. It gets a bit more grey when you've got mixed use, so you've got part of a building that's leased to a group and then the rest of it is operated and booked via council. And we also have some other examples where people have a leased building, but we do assist them with bookings. And I think the teams are very keen to work with those groups. Similarly, as Lance has indicated, they want to work with groups that are booking our services to understand what their needs are. But that's the general approach. And I think as we move into this new framework, it's really going to be a case of the teams talking to the groups that lease our premises or book our premises and trying to understand what their needs are and how we can best work with them.
Okay, and so last question, Mish, that would tie into our responsibility, I guess is the word, in terms of meeting community social outcomes and well-being. How, if we are working with council-owned and operated facilities, restricting access and things. I know it's a bit of a grey area, but what's your take on, the negative impacts on social well-being?
That's quite a hard one to answer. The whole basis of requiring the vaccine certificates is to try and protect the well-being of the community as a whole, the safety of our staff. Also, a lot of the groups that use our facilities are made up of a lot of vulnerable people, so making sure that their access isn't restricted by any concerns over exposure to COVID. I really do think that the council is just going to have to work through these issues and try and work with the groups as best we can to understand their specific needs. But obviously there's a wide range of groups that work in our facilities, so the teams won't necessarily have all the answers right now, but they'll certainly be able to update as we shift into the system.
Okay, thank you. Can I have one last one? Sorry, Lance, with such a massive change and things, will there be adequate training provided to staff and teams in terms of dealing with aggressive behaviour? I mean, we're seeing firsthand how aggressive people are becoming when they're forced to do something.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Good. Thanks, Kesh. Thank you. Couple of quick questions, Sarah, and then we might start on the debate unless there's anything unasked.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. It was just in terms of process around, there's nothing in the motion which says anything about reviewing this. So as circumstances change, or even just getting a report back on how it's going and whether, I guess we're providing delegation, but should there be something in here for governance oversight at another point along the line?
I can't answer that. It's a good question, sorry.
Look, I'm comfortable if you want to have a review in there, but I almost take it as a given that we would be reporting back on how this is. Look, the whole COVID situation has been pretty fluid, and we'll be sitting here in a year's time with, hindsight as one of our advantages. But I think, we will be in a different world in a year's time. So, and I would say also the government will be reviewing progress as well, and we will have to review the way we're operating when they carry out their reviews. We have no timeframes on that. As I said, it's been fluid, and it has been, it's been challenging at times to keep up with the situation. So, but if you want to add something in that we review this regularly or report back, I'm happy with that. I just took it as a given.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I'm fine to take just if you're able to report back regularly, I guess even if it's brief or an update or something, then that would be useful. But
well, I think
unless the mover and seconder wants to add it, then
we'll note it in the minutes. In actual fact, the government itself will be reviewing systems and things on whatever date that was yesterday. I forget what date it was. Huh? 3rd of December. Yep. Ewan, 13th. Sorry. Have you got a question, Ewan?
No, Your Worship. I'm saying that Councillor Sarah's comment's a very good one. I felt that we had somewhat attached its review to the sort of the COVID-19 protection framework that's constantly having to be extended and reviewed.
Yeah.
So whether or not Councillor Sarah wants us to actually put an extra point, or whether she's just happy with a minute note. Because I note it explains that quite well in the executive summary, but she's right, it's not actually in...
So we can just pick up one thing in the clearest thing would be to put in the motion, just that it...
Yeah.
Do you see what's being said?
Yeah.
So
okay,
we could
so
make
can we
an...
just...
The Chief Executive provides
regular
updates or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy to do that.
We won't hold up the debate while you write something in. We'll go to debate.
thank you.
Are there any other further questions? My question was asked was just about the delay since we're going into the new framework on Friday. Why we're waiting quite so long to get it cracking? I was just concerned. Do you think there's any risk in people adopting behaviours and then having to change behaviours as a consequence?
I don't think they have to change their current behaviours, because Orange is, without the My Vaccine Pass for 11 days, isn't much different to the way that we've been operating, and our communications will be very clear on the reasons why, and then about the changeover dates, and then it'll also allow them to get a little bit of a feel for it when they're going to cafes and hospo and stuff like that, having to use their My Vaccine Pass. So I think this will become normalised within about a couple of months. So I don't see there being any major risks. I can't guarantee that we would be able to operationalise all of it on the 3rd of December, and I'm also worried that we're making a decision on our vaccine policy on Friday as well, on the same day. So I think it's very tight, and I'm a little bit worried about some liability issues around Employment Relations Act matters.
All right, thank you. That answers that clearly for me. Thank you. We'll go into debate. We have a mover and a seconder. And so I'll start with, I'm only going to give you 3 minutes though, as opposed to a full 5, so that everybody can have a say if they would like, because we have an event to go to. So if that's okay, 3 minutes?
Yep.
Do I have to formally do anything?
Everyone's in agreement with that. We don't need a resolution.
Anybody, oh, Jeff's got a hand up. Is that a hand up, Jeff?
No, sorry, that was just for debate at some point.
Oh, okay, cool. So everybody happy with 3? Sing out if you're not. 3 minutes? Right, good. Okay, Ewan, as the mover.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our vocabulary has changed considerably over the last couple of years. And some of the steps that both government and local government are having to take to protect our citizens are highly unusual but I think absolutely appropriate. Sitting here, I've sort of started to try to remember the number of variants, and I've had the sort of the grammar variant, the Delta variant, the Omicron, the Beta variant. These are all variants of COVID-19 in the last 2 years. And the reality is this is going to continue for a very long time, I think. There will be multiple iterations, and central government and local government is going to have to do the one thing it finds really hard to do, which is give absolute certainty, because there's very little certainty. It's constantly evolving. And so we found ourselves in a position where we're having to implement some pretty important frameworks to protect our people. So from my point of view, the motion in front of us is sensible, it's pragmatic. It helps protect our staff, which must be our first point of call, because if we protect our staff, we then protect the second most important thing we need to protect, and that's our people, that's our citizens. I think it sets the right sense of leadership and direction. It starts saying to people that, look, in these times of crises, that there are tough decisions to be made, and we're up to being able to make them. I think the strategy in front of us is about risk mitigation. I accept that some people in our community will feel that there's an erosion of their individual rights, and I can accept that they can feel that way. But I'm more convinced now than ever that actually sometimes what's better for the broader community sometimes mean that there is some loss of individual rights. And none of what we're implementing here erodes one's ability to interact with local government, with council. You can still do that virtually, but if you want to use our facilities and if you want to come into this debating chamber, you have to be vaccinated. And I think that is a pragmatic, sensible strategy. So I support it, and I think our staff will be thankful for it, and I think our community will understand it, and this is about leadership and setting a clear direction.
Cool. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Oh, sorry, Paula, I don't think I should be going before the seconder.
Oh.
I'm happy to take my place a bit further back.
Okay, I'll go with the seconder. Dave.
Okay.
Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Dave.
Sorry, thanks Paula and Jeff. I pressed the wrong button. When Ewan was talking about the new terminology and that, I was thinking, 2 years ago I didn't even know what an epidemiologist was, let alone how to spell one. Now the CEO is even talking about being one, or having to be one as part of his job description, perhaps. Look, and someone else just said a couple of days ago, we need to stop COVID before we have to learn the whole damn Greek alphabet. It's sort of getting a bit like that. It's getting out of hand, and we need to, as Ewan talked about, play our part in providing leadership to our community here. And sitting back and allowing it to happen to us would not be providing leadership. And that's why I support the resolution that has helped work on parts of it. It's clear whenever you hear the term freedom of choice in relation to this debate, that people are talking about their personal freedom of choice and not the freedom of choice of everyone else around them in the community, fellow staff members, etc., family members even, to avoid coming into contact or to at least reduce the risk of coming into contact with COVID. The unvaccinated have a choice. And I want to state that really clearly, except perhaps for the 1 to 200 in the entire country who for medical reasons cannot get vaccinated. They're the only ones that don't have a choice. You can't drive a car without a licence, or you shouldn't, there are some things that you won't be able to do without the vaccine pass at this point in time. I don't think that'll go on forever, but at the moment, when we're trying to look after the whole community, that is the rules, and I think we should be imposing those rules within our own organisation, like this recommendation goes towards, as quickly as possible. I favour being tough, but also being sensible, which is why I appreciate the staff need those extra couple of weeks to hone in on the details. I've been involved in discussions about details at one of the centres there, and it's not a quick fix in those situations. So yes, be tough, but also use your common sense. And I'd like to thank Lance and the whole team for the way they've gone about this. I was one of the ones that would have liked it done quicker, but I appreciate we're going to have it there in the end, and we're going to have it there in time. So thanks very much for the work that's been done on this so far, and I urge all councillors to support it.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Southgate. Look, it's not an enjoyable decision to make today, but I believe it is the right thing to do. I'm aware that it's going to upset some people. There will be people I know well who'll be watching this today and will be upset. It's a polarising issue. It's an emotive issue. There are friendships at odds over this. There are families at odds over vaccination. And I don't get any pleasure out of the thought of a sector of our population feeling put upon and excluded and disenfranchised. So freedoms are compromised, it's true. I don't really have any answer for that other than a view that freedom comes with a responsibility still, a responsibility for the wider community and society. This is a huge world event akin to a world war, and in extreme situations sometimes freedoms have to be curtailed to a degree. In my heart, I think this is the right thing to do today for the city and for the staff. As Councillor Wilson said, this won't be the last time we'll have to adapt as a council to COVID. It's a continually evolving event, as we know. It's going to be with us for a long time. But I just think we would be remiss as a council not to take this decision today. It's consistent with central government advice aimed at minimising potential spread of COVID. Even more importantly to me, it's about the health and safety of our staff. Now, our obligations to our staff, this should be top of mind. We have a duty to protect our staff as much as possible, otherwise we're just not acting as a decent employer. I thank staff for the report, and thanks to Councillor Wilson and McPherson for putting this motion up, which I support.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Your Worship. You won't get a lot of argument out of me. What I was inspired by during the questioning was a phrase from our CEO and also from our Deputy CEO. Lance said our teams are being innovative, which I encourage, and Sean pushed for consistency. And so I'm supportive of this, and I'm saying let's make this as simple as possible. Remember what we're trying to achieve here. Let's keep a helicopter view on this. We're trying to keep people safe with what we have in the best manner possible. Now, I'm double vaccinated. I can still carry the virus. I just won't get as sick and hopefully won't take up a hospital bed. That's as good as we've got at this point. But I can still pass it on to someone more vulnerable than myself. That's a situation in which we live at the moment. And the only way to know that I am actually purely safe is to have a test immediately before I attend an event. And then I'll know that I'm not carrying the virus. But we don't have that technology yet like they do around the rest of the world. And I think we will be adapting as that technology arrives. And I think that will be a further discussion down the track. But only then we'll be able to achieve that level of community safety that we're really trying to achieve at the moment. So I want to just focus my very brief discussion on the funeral industry, because I have been talking with funeral directors over the last couple of days about this. And they've said, yep, sure, we agree with what you're trying to do. We could do it, but we would have to bring extra people to these services. because funeral directors, I don't know if you've seen funerals recently, but they are pretty flat out handling the service, handling the family, looking after the pallbearers, the ins and outs of it all, and of course the deceased in a very sensitive situation. So to ask them to stand at a door with a little scanner, etc., would be quite an expensive undertaking, if you'll pardon the pun. And it would cost the families more through them than it would through us. So I would strongly advise, when we have those discussions, Lance, Sean and the team, with our funeral community, to bear that in mind and to be supportive. So can I suggest, when you do talk with them about this, that we do so prepared to accept the responsibility that we do with every other one of our facilities for that first time, and for staff to report back, because I know that the funeral community will be. So let's be innovative. Let's be consistent, let's be kind-hearted, because as Sarah pointed out with her questioning, they can go to other places, and they probably will, if it comes down to it. So, yeah, that's where I'm heading with this. I'm very supportive of what we are trying to achieve in those places. Just how we manage it and who bears the cost is important.
Rob
to me.
next, and then I'll go, just in case I have
And
to
my
vacate
time
the chair.
is just about finished.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I know, we're just time-wise.
Thank you, Chair. And look, I applaud the staff for the very quick turnaround in bringing this policy to governance. I think, as Lance mentioned in response to questions, the policy needs to be reasonably fluid in the sense that it's flexible and that it's a working document and that it can be changed reasonably quickly in a constantly changing pandemic environment. I don't believe that this is a campaign against those who oppose vaccination, or believe that they're being asked to vaccinate disregards their freedom of choice. This policy allows freedoms for those who want to participate in life's activities, and to make this opportunity available, we need to make the city as safe as it possibly can be. Council is showing today leadership that is expected, not only to support our staff, but also the significant majority of our residents and visitors. And for this reason, I'll be supporting this policy today, because it's consistent with these objectives. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll take mine, and then I'll go to Ryan and then Sarah. Well, there certainly are extraordinary times that we're living in, aren't they? Particularly tough times, tough for the community in many, many ways. And we're making some decisions we thought we'd never have to make. No one really wants to make these decisions. No one really wants to be dealing with a global pandemic, but we are. And we absolutely must protect our staff, and we must protect the members of our community, and noting that 94% of our community have decided that vaccination is a way to keep themselves safe. So I support this. I do, as Mark says, I hope that people will be tolerant of others who've made different decisions. I'm really pleased that the staff have gone as far as they can in providing alternative access to facilities, to services as possible, virtually in other ways, because I think that is important. But this is the right decision. It's a tough decision in tough times, but it's the right decision. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm not at odds with a huge amount that's already been said. There are many aspects of this COVID business that I don't like, as I'm sure there are with many of you. I understand the logic that's been presented in the staff report today, and it is a very good report, and I acknowledge the trickiness and the implications that staff have had to go through to put it together. The issue of vaccine use and mandates is tricky, and as mentioned, transverses human rights, employment legislation and public health. But the fundamental key to all of this is that the vaccine is in many ways, rightly or wrongly, seen as the holy grail of our COVID release. I don't hold it in the same esteem, but rather it is but a tool in a toolbox. Whilst it may be providing improvements according to mainstream media, it is also causing grievance and division of many parts of our society, from teachers to nurses, firefighters, and even within families. People having to consider their career paths after years of loyal service. People trying to reconcile being required to do something that they can't reconcile spiritually, culturally, emotionally, and physically. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for your whānau. Do it for those who can't, is the relentless catch cry narrative. Whilst many of these decisions have already been made by central government, I won't support our council contributing to that by adding this additional step today. I'll respect the decision made, I just may not agree with it.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah.
Cheers.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. Like others, I don't find this a very comfortable decision to make, and I think particularly because unfortunately those that miss out the most will be the kids of those parents who decide not to get vaccinated. So, you know, suddenly they can't go to the library, can't go to the zoo, to the garden, closed gardens, and all those facilities where, you know, families really love to go. But at the same time, we also have a huge number of children who are going to be going to these facilities who are unvaccinated, and we do need to look after them. There is no vaccine at the moment for them, and we've got older people, particularly who use a lot of our facilities, who even when vaccinated are more vulnerable. So I will be supporting this today. I do think it is the right call. And we actually in our society have a lot of rules where we ultimately restrict people in what they do to look after others' safety and health and well-being. And Dave raised one example of driving a car. You can't drive a car without a warrant, without a licence, you have to be of a certain age, you have to be sober, you should be wearing a seatbelt, all of these things. And we do that to look after primarily other people's safety on the road, because when we go out into a public place, we should have a reasonable expectation of being safe. So I will be supporting this decision today, but I think it's absolutely important that where it's possible and where it's at a reasonable cost, that we are providing alternatives to people to access our services, because ultimately what we're trying to achieve here today is to reduce risk to public health and safety. We're not trying to exclude people from our services. So that's really needs to be a real key focus for us. And that not only ensures that people who do choose not to be vaccinated can still access important services like borrowing a book or paying their rates or whatever they need to do, but also that those who feel a bit nervous about being out because they may be more vulnerable, or have people in their family who are, they can also have a contactless service for those things that are important to them.
Thank you. Councillor Maxine.
I think Councillor Kish was in front of me, Mayor Paula.
She is, sorry. Councillor Kish.
I don't mind. Thank you, Maxine. This is one of those decisions where I'm, wearing multiple hats in my normal life. It's quite interesting to hear, all the different opinions on every side of, depending on which side you're coming from. For myself, I see this as a form of protection of our residents. When you have kids who are too young to be vaccinated, your perspective is somewhat different, because you, as a parent, you will try to do whatever you can to protect your kids, right? Or your grandkids. If you have family members who are immunocompromised or people who are unable to be vaccinated, you will do everything you can to protect them. And this is what I see this policy doing. I think that it would be vital to have a really good communication strategy if this does happen, because just listening to the questions and going through the report, there'd be a lot of questions, I think, from the community as to what they're allowed to do and what they're not. As a mum, I'd like to know that anyone can visit a playground and anyone can use the public toilets at the playground, not necessarily just vaccinated families, and I think that would be quite important for our mum to know. So just small details like that. With my wearing my health professional hat, I think vaccination. Gosh, I think it's a public health issue. I don't think it's a political issue. I think it's become a political issue, which is really sad, because when you're on the other side, dealing with sick people day in and day out, it's totally eye-opening as to what the risks, what the real risks are, and it's just it's become very political, which is why it's become so polarizing. And you've got family members on different sides of the argument, and it's become an argument, whereas from my health background, it shouldn't be. It should be an issue about safety and protection, because that's the science behind it. In terms of health and safety, I'm supporting this again, just to ensure health and safety measures for council staff. As a pharmacy business owner, we can't screen people for vaccination passes. We have to serve everyone who walks through the door, and my responsibility to my pharmacy staff, I have very limited capacity for their health and safety, but this is one way in which I can ensure that other people can still be safe at work. But yes, I mean, gosh, we have to just look at
Sorry, Cash.
pandemics and history, and we know that this
Cash,
is
we're out of time. Sorry, out of time. We've got an important thing. Thank you anyway. Councillor Max.
Kia ora, and thank you. Thanks staff and Mayor Paula for bringing this to our committee today for decisions. It's not an easy decision to make, and one that doesn't sit entirely well with me to exclude people from certain aspects of our work. But when I'm making these decisions, I draw on my own background and the knowledge that I hold, and where I come from is a union background, the good of the collective, and the fight that unions do in order to be able to bring better conditions, better work for their members. And in that regard, I think of our staff, but I also think of our community, and I reflect on our vision, Hamilton's vision, that states that in everything we do, we aim at improving the well-being of Hamiltonians. And I believe that by following the motion put to us today, that it does have that well-being at its very centre. I think the needs of the many, just as in our union brothers and sisters, what they hold far outweighs the loss of privileges for some. And I'm encouraged that our CE has some robust plans in place to ensure that services are available to those who won't be able to display a vaccination certificate. That we've got in place some ability to be able to help some of our older citizens so that they can access and show us their vaccination certificates. I think that's really important, that if we are excluding some, that we give them the opportunity to be able to engage with us in different ways that might not sit so well with them, but ways that they will have to themselves adapt to. And their choice should not impact or put at risk the safety of the many. I think also I'm mindful that the really hardest part is making the initial decision, and that I also agree with our CE in that the use of the vaccination certificate will become just as everyday as using an EFTPOS card, or logging into apps or other things that people use both on the internet and mobile phones.
Maxine.
Thank you. I'll be supporting, of course, the motion today and look forward to working alongside others to make sure that our citizens, all of our citizens, have access to all of our services. Thank you.
All right, thanks. We're going to Angela. Just to let you know, I have to leave the room in 7 minutes, so hopefully we can get through Angela and write a reply. Otherwise, I've got to change chair. Go, Councillor O'Leary.
I won't be 3 minutes. Look, I just want to say that, you know, over my time on council, we used to, with audit and risk, we used to have these once a year workshops where we would, and I've said this before, we would talk about black swan events. And there was always on the board a pandemic, but we never spent a lot of time talking through that. And I think probably we just assumed that we live in this new tech world and those days are past us. But those days are now not past us, and that black swan event is here. So I just want to acknowledge and congratulate staff for last year and this year actually, and the work that's been done in this report for something that we didn't foresee would hit our shores, and it has. And through last year and this year, you know, we've pretty much operated with business as usual, and I think that that's tremendous and needs to be acknowledged. This is our job as governors. This is our job to make this decision. Councillor McPherson is right. People have choice, and we're exercising our choice as governors to keep, number one, our staff safe and then the public safe. We are managing what is in our control, and we are doing that for all the right reasons, I believe. This is an uncertain world, and we are taking the steps to exercise that choice. So fully support the motion, and thank you for those that worked on it.
Thank you. I haven't missed anybody, have I? Right of reply?
No required. No right of reply required.
Fantastic. No right of reply, in which case we will go to the motion as set out there. It's been moved, it's been seconded, and I'll see... put it on the screen, please. Show the screen, thanks. So all the Zoom people have got their little ticky system working really well. And do you want us to vote here on the board or hands? Show of hands is fine. Show of hands full in the room.
Those against?
Those against?
Motion is carried, noting Councillor Hamilton dissenting.
Thank you very much, everyone, to the way this debate was conducted. Thank you to staff. It's not easy, it's not pleasant for any of us or the wider community that we deal with, and I just want to big respect to you all for the way we've dealt with this today. Thank you, councillors, and for those who are coming down the road with us, we must fly. Thank you.
Fly.
Fly.